So I'd like to ask you to think of 4 women that you know. Research on sexual assault shows us that approximately 1 in 4 women will experience attempted or completed rape by the time she completes her undergraduate degree. Of these women, up to 85% of them will not acknowledge this experience as a form of sexual assault or as a form of rape, even though these experiences meet the legal definition of sexual assault. So this is important because women, regardless of their labeling status, experience the same negative health outcomes and decrease in general well-being after an experience of sexual violence. However, women who don't acknowledge their experiences commonly don't seek medical services or social support or even forms of support informally through friends or family. Much of the acknowledgement literature looks at what influences acknowledgement, but what I would like to know is, how do women who don't acknowledge understand their experiences? And more specifically, how do women understand, acknowledge, or label experiences of verbal coercion that occur within romantic or sexual relationships? We know that assault is commonly perpetrated by someone that the victim knows, and so it's really important for us to look at the relationship to the perpetrator. We know that when women have experiences with men that they're in a relationship with, this decreases the likelihood that they'll acknowledge these experiences as a form of sexual assault. This also extends to cases where sex is a normal or expected part of that relationship. Verbal coercion, which is also common in relationships, is also not recognized very commonly as a form of sexual violence. Coercion essentially means that somebody is using a form of pressure to convince somebody else to participate in an act, and this can be either verbal or through physical force. So essentially what's happening when coercion is present is that someone is saying yes to something that they wouldn't have said yes to without that form of pressure. And this is really important because coercion, being so common in relationships, is also not commonly recognized when it's experienced from a romantic partner. So I based much of my research on Nicola Gavy's work. Gavy looks at normative heterosexuality as the main barrier to acknowledgement. Normative heterosexuality refers to the roles and expectations that we hold for both men and women in regards to sexual contact. So when we're saying that verbal coercion is a normal part of sex, it obscures the fact that using verbal coercion is really not okay. Consent has to be given freely without any kind of pressure or force. This research represents a qualitative study that's being conducted online and has a mix of forced choice questions and open-ended questions. So I've chosen to pursue this topic through the lens of critical theory and feminist theory, wherein I'm looking at the social determinants of how women understand their experiences. I've also chosen methods that allow women to tell their stories and explain their experiences and their methods of understanding them in their own voice, which is something that I believe is really important. After completing a consent form and a demographic survey, women will complete a narrative and then answer questions about acknowledgement. This data will be analyzed using thematic analysis, which essentially means that we'll be looking for themes in the research data. So we'll be looking for themes in the way that women understand their experiences, and we're hoping that through this research, we'll be able to create a deeper understanding about how women think about experiences that they do not label as a form of sexual assault. This research forms my undergraduate honors thesis and will be presented in April 2016.